Welcome, everyone. Welcome to part 3 of the Kubernetes 1.23 release retrospective. Your host today is Taylor Dolezal. I am the release lead for 123. My name is Ray Lejano. This meeting abides by the CNCF Code of Conduct, which boils down to be nice and be kind and excellent to each other. This meeting is also recorded and uploaded to YouTube. To Taylor, I hand it off to you.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. So 2's a party, 3 is part 3. Really excited to get through some of this feedback and address these items with y'all. So each of these items, for those of you following along or not familiar with taking a look at this before or watching the recording, each of these are prefixed by the people that raised up these issues. And this is part 3. So we're going to be beginning from where we started at the end of part 2. And that is with this item from Ray about calendar invites. So as we go through these items, I'll call out the person that raised them up. If they aren't here, we'll see if there's any feedback that people have around those issues. And if not, we'll just continue forward. With that, I'd love to kick it over to you, Ray, to bring up this first item.
All right. So we usually always have an issue with calendar invites going to spam. And I advise, and I will add this to the release handbook as well, as to have release team members also subscribe to the Kubernetes release calendar as well. Just another like failover in case they do not get an invite to their email. I've also had folks confirm folks who are on the Kubernetes release team group, but they also say that they cannot don't have invites as well. So. Any thoughts or questions or comments?
So one thing to note, especially if you're in so if you join a group, if you join a Google group, there's some Automagic that happens eventually where you'll get a calendar invite if the group is invited, right? But there's kind of like a long tail as you're joining the group. It's something to note for folks who do not have or who are not using Gmail, Google Workspace, etc. Accounts, is that these things will very often get marked as like if you're using Outlook or something, suspected spam. So in addition to adding the, in addition to subscribing to the calendar or making sure that you're on the email list, I would also suggest adding it to safe senders in your what have you email account, insert provider here, email account. Outside of that, I use Outlook for work, but I use Gmail for everything else, or Google Workspace for everything else. I often also like make sure that I'm subscribed on a Google Workspace account, and then duplicate the events over to my work account just to make sure they're in my calendar. So unfortunately, the calendars suck in general, but safe senders and duplicating the events can sometimes help too.
Thank you, Stephen. That's also what I do as well. I also duplicate the events to my work calendar, but I will make it explicit in the handbook, and also there's any onboarding guides as well. So new shadows will be advised to do the same.
Awesome.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Fantastic. I'd love to kick it over to you, Ray, for the next one.
All right. So as a lead for 123, and I did not have experience as a lead shadow before, so did not know what the requirements and if there were any internal discussions on accepting exception requests. And so I would like to see some clarification on the requirements on accepting exception requests. I have some insight to this, so that I could take this as my action item as well after gaining some experience with this release. But any other comments or questions?
Maybe a general comment, not for this item, but noticing in like for all retros forever. Shadows who are on the call, please speak up. Please provide feedback. This call is for all of us, and your opinions are equally important to any of your leads.
So there's a lead shadow in 123. Kind of doesn't count to your point, Stephen. I also find it difficult to understand exactly when we should be granting exceptions and when not. Like the general guidance is relatively, honestly, vague at, if it's release blocking, but that I think is open to quite a lot of interpretation. And maybe that's good. Maybe it shouldn't be too harsh. I understand that there is a kind of a balance to be found there, but I'm not sure what it is as of yet. So I suppose a +1 to raise point in a roundabout sort of way.
Yeah, I think some of the criteria has maybe been written intentionally vaguely, only because it's one of those instances where it depends is the answer. I think accepting a request is going to depend on like who's putting it up. If you actually have confidence in whether the thing is going to land, if it is release blocking, right? So if for this cycle where we are moving into 124, where we are, Docker shim removal is one of the big things that will be a major theme. If anything, if anything from that was missing, I would almost say like we're blocking this release. Like, if an exception request came in for it, and we're like, oh, we're missing docs, we're like, those need to happen, right? So it's like it will really depend on the scenario, and I think that we should. I agree that we should have guidance. I think that we need to make a note that the guidance is going to depend on the situation, and this should be used as kind of a framework for evaluating an exception as opposed to hard rules.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
All right, back to you, Ray. Via
right.
release managers.
So this came from Slack about fast forwards and cherry picks. And I remember when I started in the release team in 118, we were doing fast forwards, or daily fast forwards. And I don't recall when we switched to cherry picks. I want to say it's maybe 119 or 120. I don't remember specifically. And the question is like, should we reinstitute fast forwards for release branches until thaw, or should we continue on with cherry picks? In either case, we should have more communication with this in all the comms for releases going into code freeze, and also when the branch is cut. So that is one takeaway that I have. So, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is another, like, it depends. So part of the because there was such a distance between when certain things were happening, like either releases or branch cuts or something like that, or when code freeze was actuated, yada yada yada. We moved towards that cherry pick thing, right? And when it's a the fast forward is nice to have, because like it's just, you don't have to worry about this, it's happening. Given the branch cut has moved to RC and the RCs are happening roughly around code freeze, if not on code freeze, right? It becomes a situation where if you want to get it in, it should go under some sort of review, right? So having the release managers as a gate doing cherry pick review kind of gives us this additional confidence level that the thing is actually intended for the release, right? So that was, that's some of the motivation behind it. As we talk about, like, if we want to do thaw earlier, however we kind of want to slice it up, If we want to do thaw earlier, if code freeze happens later or earlier, or branches reopen, like however, you know, there are a few parameters, and depending on how we talk through them, will determine if fast forwards make sense, right? If we were to open, if we were to reopen the primary development branch earlier, that means that fast forwards would be really bad, right? If we decide to keep it as is and not thaw until the release is happening, then then potentially we bring them back, right? But the initial motivation was because it is so close, because we have landed like RC and RC and the branch cut and code freeze roughly around the same time. The things that should be going into the branch anyway should be explicitly reviewed, right? So.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add is I think a technical limitation is here that we merge pull requests when they are on the milestone, and it may be possible that we create, so we don't sync the RC creation with the actual fact if everything has been merged into master during that point. So it may be possible that some PRs got slipped through and then merged after the branch creation. So then we have an issue. So because from a contributor perspective, the contributor wouldn't know, do I have to cherry pick now, or is it already in the release branch? So I think we should avoid this manual step technically somehow.
So this might be a really stupid question because I'm not involved in the branch management side as much as I would know. Why do we have
no
a
stupid questions?
Why do we? Why do we have a freeze at all? Like, why don't like the moment we create the release branch? Why don't we say that the main or master development branch is now open for the next release? If we're not automatically syncing between the two, why is it frozen?
History. And there's no guarantee that we can effectively coordinate across all SIGs and passerby contributors that are pushing new code content, that it is actually content that belongs in the release that is that the branch has just been cut for, or it should go in a new one. So if we have a mix of that content and decide to open early, and people's I'm pushing something that's critical for 123, but someone else has changed, made an API change that should be a 124 API change. I've built my 123 critical fix off of something that is changing an API. We've got a problem, right, for 123, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I don't know if this is the place to decide for 124, but
it's not. It would be the rel
yeah.
engine.
I did hear from Sasha about like removing the manual step, but we could continue this the release engineering meeting, but just would like to bring it up.
Awesome.
Prowl will be made smarter. We talked about, kind of technical limitations, meaning you don't know whether, because the branch cut happens at a different point when Prowl merges stuff. Can Prowl be made smart enough to realize that, oh, this merge after a branch cut, I should probably tell the author that you might want to PR this, or do it automatically even.
Yeah, maybe we can reconsider if master freeze is actually required. I mean, I think this could be a good path forward to rethink if we need this.
Yeah, and I again to note that, like, for people who are here, or listening later, this is historical. This is one of those aspects that, like, oh, we've been doing it a while this way, and we've made tweaks to the process over time, but it's largely historical, right? In maybe, I don't know if it's an ideal world or something, right? But like, there is some world where maybe you only work on a release branch, like a release branch gets cut immediately, and you only work on a release branch. right? There are different, there are a bunch of different ways to slice it. I think that something else to look at is like if you think about like things that were encoded into the handbooks way back when, like when we do meeting times and stuff like that, and it that was something that was historically, because the people who had access to do the releases were on the West Coast, the meetings always trended towards specific time zone, right? And that was, there was no reason that the meetings were that way outside of that, and then that context kind of gets lost over time. And then we change the meetings, right? so this is something that we can definitely discuss and see if we can make improvements. But I will say that the reason for it is historical.
Also, I just want to convey that whenever we've been having issues around this topic, most of the real benefit could come from actually doing that, reopening, cutting the branch and reopening master instantly. There are like the few technical challenges that Sasha mentioned, but from what I've been gathering, most of the benefits would go from having that approach. Once the branch is cut, you start following the cherry pick process like you have always been doing for other branches, except that maybe for a pro release, but it's the same triaging and process for the cherry picks for that, and that would have the benefit of opening master instantly and avoiding the whole fast forward not discussion.
Any other feedback or questions or comments? Awesome. Thank you all. Definitely something that might be worth bringing up at the release engineering meeting as well, like Steven said. And awesome. Great feedback on all fronts. Jesse, I'd love to turn it over to you.
Hi. Oh, right. I think this is like a bookkeeping thing. So the spreadsheet is workable, but when it gets messed up, only having the one enhancements lead as that like the sole point of remedy is probably not great. So at a minimum, I'd say add the docs lead to the data sheet. So the data sheet feeds all the other sheets, it cascades out from there. So that's really the only place that things can get really jammed up. That only happened once in this cycle, but I think going forward, if we're going to keep using a spreadsheet, it would be good to have at least 2 people with full admin rights.
The entire release team at Kubernetes.io list should have edit access. Like the only points of, if we're talking, are we talking about the enhancement tracking sheet?
Yeah.
Just for one tab in the sheet.
Yeah, so part of the reason for restriction to the sheet was because it is like one of our primary points of tracking, and it needs to be accurate. One of the restrictions that we did was the ensuring that only the leads could edit certain tabs or something, right? And there was a bit of hoopla about that. But the reason behind that is like, if the data is wrong, we got a problem, right? The team doesn't know what what status the enhancement's actually in, or or an enhancement owner, lead for a SIG or something, can change the status of an enhancement and maybe not have a chance to communicate or validate that status is actually the status that it should be, right? So I think from the release team perspective, we understand what the state of the sheet needs to be. And it would make sense to have a bunch of people having access to that. I don't see a reason to restrict that.
Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead, James.
So I tried when I was enhancements lead back in 122. I tried to do this, and I mean, admittedly, my Google Sheets like magic level is not high enough, perhaps, but I wasn't able to figure out how to do it. I don't think it's possible, because the way it's implemented in the sheet is that you can be in an editor or a or a viewer of the sheet, and then there are like row and of the spreadsheet as a whole with all of its tabs. I mean, you can be like a tab, or what it calls a sheet, or a range and level editor. But unless you are the owner, those edit kind of protections apply to you, even if you have right on the entire sheet. And I couldn't see a way of adding multiple owners, which meant that only the person who owned the sheet, which was the enhancements lead, had the ability to do everything. And other than that, you had to go through every single protected range and change the users on it. I mean, maybe it's just an activity to go through the protected range and add leads to everyone, but it's not a simple trivial operation to just say set as owner, because I couldn't find a way. And again, this could just be user error, but I couldn't find a way of setting multiple owners.
Yeah, and I think that is an implementation detail. That is the one I'm looking for as a suggestion, is saying at least adding the docs lead along with the enhancement lead as an owner. If we can't set 2 owners, then I guess we're dead in the water. But we had one, so Xander was the enhancements lead, and just at one point everything backed up behind him. And I think that's really unfair to one person to be like, oh, by the way, it's 11:30 at night. Hey, can you jump online and do a thing? Like, that's what I'm trying to avoid, though. And it is just, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, it is really just that data sheet, the one that's called data, because that feeds everything else. And you know, in our scenario, it was, we were right at the end of trying to get things in ready for review, and everything just went great. And we're like, oh, now there are workarounds for this. Like when we started, so I was the docs lead for 123, and we started by kind of putting a split mind note into a place that we had full control. So we were actually tracking in 2 places. So we didn't actually lose data, but that's only because I had the forethought and the previous docs leads telling me this is going to be a problem, so have some workaround. Other people have like taken copies of their own. It's just so I guess maybe there's an AI there to see if we can add a secondary owner.
I just checked.
Yeah,
According
you
to the
can't.
documentation, you can't.
You can't. So there is a single owner for the owner is whoever has created the item. You can add multiple editors, but there's a single owner for Google Sheets. I would like to call out because we've been, I think, you know, in the previous session, we were also talking about enhancements tracking spreadsheet is awful. Like, yes, it is. And we proposed a process in the enhancement subproject called the receipts process, which is the enhancement tracking is there. I've linked it in the Zoom chat. If someone can copy it over to the notes. And then there was a provisional PR for receipts here. That process was designed to destroy that sheet. And no one has had the bandwidth to carry it forward. If people are interested, like longer tail activity, if people are interested in seeing that sheet go away, we already developed a process for doing it.
I want this sheet to die so badly.
And like as someone who has worked on, like, was in the release team for like 110, 111, working on features before we rebranded to enhancements, like, trust me, I know it's one of the first things that I was like, this needs to go away. And for as long as we've said that, no one has managed to do it. The sheet has gotten better over time, and there are more whiz bobs and doodads on it and magical permissions that do all these kinds of fun things. But it is a terrible way to be tracking releases. Like, we need to sprinkle some actual magic on it, and the receipts process is the way to do it. Someone with the bandwidth needs to help carry it forward.
I thought the problem with the release process, the receipts process, is that there were, like, admittedly, I haven't looked at it in some time, but I remember looking at it back around 122 and kind of came to the conclusion that there wasn't consensus to take it forwards. Like, it wasn't that there was no one to do it, it was that there wasn't enough agreement that it was the correct way forwards. Is that right, or have I misunderstood?
I would maybe tweak that a little to, there was no one willing to say that there is a point at which discussion should stop. We should make some sort of decision to carry something forward, even if it's working on it incrementally. And that is a general problem with enhancements. There are PRs that have been, there are feature tracking issues, enhancement tracking issues that have been opened for years. They're ones that I get pinged on because I was pinging people on them 2-3 years ago. There are kept PRs that have been open for years, and the whole like concept of merging and iterating, right? Starting off with a kernel of the idea and building on top of that, right, to get a faster feedback loop. I think there were attempts to solve it all instead of starting something new that is more useful and getting the feedback by working through that process. There's no one willing to say, all right, this is so bad, like we have to try something new. We have to do this, right? A lot of the people who have provided feedback, and I think this goes for many areas in the project and in life, right? A lot of the people who provide feedback are not necessarily the stakeholders of the process, feature, enhancement, what have you. And that blocks a lot of things. If you're going to provide feedback but not help action on the process itself, that's a little problematic. And rant.
I can't grok all this stuff right now. This is the first time I'm seeing it. I'd be happy to look at it, especially since I'll be involved in 124. So James, maybe you and I can hook up and figure out an appropriate AI on this.
AI?
Action item.
Action item.
Artificial intelligence is fine too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I don't think that we can make any substantive changes to 124. I think that my problem is that every time we change, especially the enhancements kind of subscription opt-in process, everyone gets mad about it because we've changed something. And I sympathize with that view, right? From the perspective of a enhancement author, you don't really care about this process. You just want it to work. And if we change it every release, I can see that gets annoying. So I see that we are a little bit stuck in that we don't want to make a big bang change because if we don't get it perfect, it'll be awful. But if we make an incremental change and effectively say to enhancement authors, we're going to change it slightly for the next 6 releases, that's probably not also going to go down well either.
So a bit of context there. I agree. And I think if we were to land it, it would have to land for a 125 at a baseline, right? This is something that needs to be
clear. I was not in any way suggesting we try to change it for 124. I just really want to make sure people don't think I'm that crazy.
Yeah. But to provide a bit of context, the opt-in process that was added to the cycles was meant to be an incremental change, a human incremental change to set us up to start the receipts process. They're like, we don't want to add this to your bucket right here immediately, but this opt-in process will be the human version of what receipts will eventually be.
Excellent. Any other feedback or any notes or action items worth adding?
One low impact set of changes we could make is keep the spreadsheet for the data tab and then just split the spreadsheet into like multiple spreadsheets to do the other bits. Because, well, whether or not the spreadsheet as a whole is an artifact that is consumed by the wider community, I don't know whether you view it like that, but certainly the not the data tab, the tab where enhancement, so SIG chairs come and put in things is the kind of, yeah, the opt-in is kind of the main interface to the rest of the community.
That just for posterity's sake, that's called kept collection. That
kept collection, yes. Sorry, I forgot what it's called. So you could split the spreadsheet. Maybe that would make the permissions easier, or maybe it would make it harder and harder to find anything. Maybe we'll be sitting. Sorry.
Yeah, we more arcane knowledge. Each team many moons ago had something of their own sheet, and we consolidated down into a single spreadsheet to make it easier for everyone to understand the same data at the same time and operate in the same place. So I say that to say, like, if we think it works better, then sure, consider it, but it's a thing that we have done before.
Awesome. Definitely, it seems like it'll take a little bit more discussion and definitely some A/B testing to find something that works. But good to see we've got something kicked off there, and then definitely action item for taking a look at how to open up that access. Awesome. I'm going to move on. Just in interest of time, we can circle back and talk to that if we've got a little bit extra time. Jesse, love to turn it over to you for the next one as well.
Yeah. So speaking of me being crazy, so this is me collecting at least 3 releases back various leads that have said we need to do away with the spreadsheet tracking. I was talking with Eddie Zaneski. He mentioned that he had talked with Paris. There's maybe some idea of writing a requirement stock and seeing if we can find a contractor to build something. Xander and I started spitballing. James jumped in. We were actually designing something over Slack. So I just wanted to put it on people's radars because I get the feeling that everyone complains about this and then we don't actually put it in here because it's too crazy to propose it. And I don't think that what I'm intending to propose is so much a process change of how to work with the sheet better, but actually a lot more automation. I mean, basically everything that we do is about tracking PRs and updating a spreadsheet. So if a bot tracked PRs and updated a database, it would be a little bit simpler.
So please, for people who are actually interested in this, going back to the note that like people like to provide feedback and will not action on the thing, and you'll get the feedback from the entire community, and we'll get the yes, we hate the spreadsheet, please make it go away. This is every cycle since I've been in this community. Every cycle, people will talk about the spreadsheet. Please review the receipts kept. Like exactly what you're talking about is what that is.
Perfect. Yeah, I didn't even know about that. So that's great. That I mean, I guess that's an AI for me, is that I will go review that and see what I can help with fresh eyes.
Cool.
And an innocent voice who doesn't know better.
I am no longer enhancement sub-project owner, but I am still one of the kept tool reviewers. I'm happy to review things as I'm able. I would sync up with Nabarun, who is one of the last folks who worked on it.
Cool.
Awesome. Any other feedback or items to address for this item? Awesome. Moving along, I don't see Tim B on the call, but we'll just read this out and we can review. Recent releases have gone live with buggy reference docs and then have had post-release fix-ups. Can we make that process work more smoothly?
So I have some background on this. So this is with the docs process where the docs team builds reference docs. Since 120, and it might have happened before 120, it's always been difficult to build these reference docs. There's tacit knowledge that folks have. There's dependencies that that folks have that the docs team does not know of. So we've had to rely on SIGDocs folks to build these reference docs. I did ask after I was doxing the 121 for folks to share those instructions and share those dependencies that were missing when we build reference docs, but haven't had any response to that. So yeah, this is an ongoing issue. and we saw it again in 120, 121, 122, 123, that we need to resolve in getting just getting the process to build a reference doc so that the docs team can do so independently.
Yeah, so following on from that, so that these two are related, these two bullets from Tim, and the, I mean, basically exactly what Ray said. The build changes, the docs don't change, and so our release handbook, the timeline refers to the published docs, and the docs are not always accurate. So I am currently actively working with SIGDocs maintainers to make sure that we not only have some updated instructions for 124, but also that there's like a mechanism in place to keep the docs in sync with the tools and the build process. I think that's really the problem. It's certainly not intentional that there's tacit knowledge that only a couple people know, but it's happened because I think there's no mechanism in place to keep things synced up. So for what it's worth, the timeline does say start the builds several weeks ahead of the release. Related to the final bullet here, it didn't help because it was broken. so we will do what we can here to make it more smooth for 124, but also to see if we can improve going forward.
And it's figuring out something that's qualitative and not quantitative is kind of difficult too. If we're just checking links, that's something that's pretty straightforward. But if it's something like this isn't exactly the documentation that makes sense, or like you said, other dependencies, that's a little bit more difficult to debug. So I'm sure that we can tackle what we need to from a technical perspective. Again, that's more straightforward, but those other qualitative things are definitely things we can iterate on. Awesome. Any other feedback on this item? Then I can move into Tim's next item. Excellent. Would it make sense to get draft updates for generated docs several weeks ahead of release? That should highlight any build snags well before release day.
Yeah, this is what Jesse mentioned, how we actually do start. we start when the first RC is cut, and that's in the handbook already.
Awesome. Wonderful. Any other feedback on this item? Cool. With that, we're in the parking lot and there's nobody here. So that's also good to note. We do have some action items defined. Are there any other items worth addressing or anything that anyone wants to bring up before we draw things to a close?
So I updated the action items, what I think I'll do is I will ping this SIG release channel for a thread on action items from the retro and tag folks on their action items so that it's on public Slack.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ray. Any other items that anyone wants to bring up?
Hi, sorry that I missed my own item because I came a little bit later. What I wanted to say about that is that I have been feeling, probably this is for another discussion, but I have been feeling that we are toughening up our process for shadows and people who apply for that, because for many reasons. And I think that part of it can be a bit unfair because the point that I put here was that people talking to people like at KubeCon or different places that people feel comfortable to talk to me about for different reasons have provided informal feedback that they don't feel empowered to take on different tasks for different reasons, because sometimes they think that they will fail and so they prefer not to do anything. So in general, the sentiment is like that some shadows haven't across different cycles haven't felt empowered to just grab tasks and be in a more efficient way. So yeah, I know that videos or trainings have been mentioned, but I just wanted to point out that obviously that I agree with all of those views, but I just wanted us to be a little bit more more understanding on the other side point of view, because and not just from our own side, that we want everything to be done like faster and more efficiently, which is obviously necessary. But yeah, just wanted to share that vision from not even myself, but from feedback that I have been provided by different people across different cycles that are just trying to learn and sometimes don't feel empowered.
So I love that feedback. Well, I mean, I love that we now have that feedback. I don't love that people are feeling that way. I think the overarching note is like, be kind, like wherever, whenever, however you can, to folks, for leads who are coming into newly coming into their roles, or or have led in the past, or for shadows who are interested in leading, internalize that. Being kind is very important. Making people feel supported is very important. I did a little keynote on this. The contributor to maintainer chasm is pretty tricky, right? There are things that we learn year to year as a result of just being in the project for more time, right? And there is a cough coming. Hold on. I'm back. And there is, almost an unfair advantage sometimes for folks who have the opportunity to work on this as part of their job, right? I'm incredibly fortunate over the years where I just made this part of my job when I was doing field and solutions architecture and stuff like that. And people were like, this is more, my bosses were like, this is more valuable than what you're slated to do for this company. Like, keep doing the open source stuff, right? So there are people who are fortunate enough that they have the work time to actually focus on learning everything in Kubernetes. It is impossible to learn everything that is here. We need to, if you are one of those people, if you are in a lead role, if you are looking to be in a lead role, part of your job as a leader, or as as an emerging leader, is to leave breadcrumbs, is to leave behind little things that can help empower people. That's the reason, and again, I'm looking back to wow, many moons ago, a younger day. I wrote one of the first, or the first handbook. Now we have handbooks for all of the roles. The handbooks get updated every cycle. That's a way of encoding knowledge to the team, empowering them to do the things. And here are the things that I ran into, and here's why this is crazy, and why this is bad, and why this looks the way it is, but we need it to look the way it is because of blah, right? More coughs, hold on. So you need to think about ways to scale yourself and to empower your teams, right? For shadows listening to this, please feel free to provide direct feedback to anyone who is in a lead role to get this out. Feeling feeling like you're not empowered is not our goal at all. But if we do not have the feedback, we don't know to action on things, right? So part of your responsibility is if something is not working for you, you need to tell us. You find and if it needs to come from multiple paths, you don't feel comfortable talking to a certain person, talk to someone else, have them talk to someone, right? One, you should never feel that way. We have multiple systems in place to the reason the emeritus advisors exist, the reason there are multiple lead shadows, the reason there is a dedicated release team technical lead. The reason that we have scaled our leadership team in SIG release from 2 people to like 5 people, right? We're trying to scale for process. We're trying to, like, the only way that we become more efficient as a SIG, as a group, as a family, whatever you want to call it, is by creating opportunities for the other people, right? When we create opportunities for more people, that means that thing that you were bugged by, and you're like, you look at the enhancements thing, like something 11, it's blah. Oh my God, I have to do this one thing that someone else could be doing. Like, look at the things that, there are so many opportunities to like scale ourselves, right? The reason that the release managers group is global, right? So we can play hot potato with a release. We can start in APAC, or we can start in EU, shift it over to US East, shift it over to US West. If it's not done, we shift back to the next time zone, right? We need to be more candid with if things are not working for you. And there are some mechanisms, the shadow surveys, the retrospective, right? There are mechanisms. If we need more, please tell us, or we want to work with you to figure that out. But if we do not receive feedback, we don't know there's a problem.
A big +1 to that too. I think that kind of starting out, I know personally, trying to figure out where to go or how to orient myself was a big thing, and thanks to Shadows and everybody else. It is a big place, and when you yell, it's hard to feel heard in some in some cases, especially when everyone, when there are others that are yelling too. And so a huge +1 to kind of, if there's someone that you feel comfortable speaking with or talking to or getting that feedback to, I highly recommend that. I know I've had I've been lucky enough to have a couple people to talk to as I've come up within Kubernetes, and if time is the thing that we need, if we feel like we're moving way too fast, we can slow down. We've gone from 4 releases to 3, and as other things come up or new concerns come about or better ways of getting that feedback or just fidelity of feedback loop come up, we can change these things to work for us. So we aren't bound to the process. We're the people that create it, and we can shape that. So a huge +1 on all those fronts. And yeah, please add us, if there's anything that you want to talk about.
Just a final note on all of this to wrap it up. I feel that I totally get the sentiment from open source work, where there are projects or even still pieces of Kubernetes where we need to have people who are extremely experienced and straight to the point and no failure, etc. But there are also, I think that specifically for the release team, we have grown so much in positive ways mostly, that now we are having more time and more resources of different types to better support people in this path. So I think it's also a lot of philosophical mind shift. Sorry, I'm starting with my terms, but yeah, like a philosophical mind shift of just saying like, hey, wait, we can now afford to change the way we communicate things. We don't need like the expert of the expert to handle this task, or I don't know. So that's just it. Thanks for listening.
Completely agree. Like, between Veronica's feedback and Taylor, something that Taylor touched on was like, we have the power. We have the power to change these things, right? So this speech that maybe I should give more often, it's silly. When I have time and I remember at the beginning of a cycle, I will basically give a speech that amounts to like, do not assume that anything is right. like you have like the handbooks are there as something to guide. Don't assume that anything is right, or that what's written down is still true. It may have been true at some point. It may no longer be true. Don't assume that just because it's written down that it needs to stay that way, right? we have so many opportunities to optimize our processes, but like they won't happen if you feel like what is written down is law, right? You have so much power to change things. And the, you know, and the hope is like, you know, as a like as a budding shadow, I was like, oh my god, I want to work on this thing, and Ihor was like, go work on it, like that's cool, like you know, like let's go fix that. Absolutely, if you want to take that on, go for it, right? And like so many people who have like supported my path, right, here, and like you can be that for someone else. You may not even know it. A piece of documentation that you wrote that kind of set them in place can be that guiding principle for them in open source and Kubernetes, right? You know, just the thought of like everything is correct. It's like it's so not true, and it's like, oh, I have to do it this way because blah, or I, you know, there's something that's missing here. Is it missing because it's not important? No, not necessarily. Like we're human. We've missed things. We miss things all the time. We will continue to miss things. Docs will be wrong. Release notes will get messed up. We'll bork a release. The release will, you know, something will happen. Security vulnerabilities will come out. Like all kinds of things will get in our way, right? But again, you have so much power to change these things. Like if you think there's something missing that should be there, maybe you're the person to write it. There's a portion of like, there's a consistent need for, you know, active mentorship. There is also a need for sometimes we don't know what we need, right, as a group altogether, right? Or, you know, sometimes we may be looking to, you know, from the release lead side, right? I no longer have time in my schedule to attend release team meetings, right? That's the thing that I can't do anymore. There are times where we may be looking too far above the trees that we don't know that something is happening or something is broken, right? So while there is a need to, while there's a need to strengthen the way that we mentor people coming up through shadow roles and hopefully build them into leaders, maintainers of Kubernetes and elsewhere, there's also a need for people to tell us what's on their mind and to self-empower a little bit, right? There are things that you can work on that just by the nature of what we are, being an open source project, like you can do. You can find the person to talk to and go for it, right? Again, while we need to strengthen the way we do mentorship, we also need the people who are coming up to feel empowered. Like it has to come. There's a part of it that needs to come from inside, right? Okay, I'll stop. Yeah.
And doubling down on what Stephen and Veronica said in terms of like, I think that you both hit upon something that was really powerful, and that was, you know, question everything, because what's, like you said, what was right at one point in time doesn't mean it still is. You know, if we need to focus this time, maybe we don't focus on going fast. Maybe we focus on growing, you know, people and some different processes therein. You know, just because that's what we did yesterday doesn't mean that's what we need to do today. So fantastic words. I need to find where y'all buy your soapboxes, because that's good stuff.
I'd say if we have like boilerplates in code for licensing things, why not add a boilerplate to the handbooks and defining them as, by definition, always behind current practices and open for changes? I think I'll do some work around that at some point.
That's a great idea.
Love that. Yeah.
Awesome.
There's this fantastic book I read recently, which I won't go into too much, but it talked about how there's different kinds of organizations, and an older style of organization works by predicting how things worked in the past and assuming that everything will work in the same way forwards. But more modern organization types are built around the idea of constant change. So kind of going from that, I think it's definitely a good idea to emphasize that things will change always.
Yeah, and I mean this will definitely ring true for anyone who has had the opportunity or misfortune, I don't know, to work at like early stage startups or like incubation innovation groups where like you may pivot the entire thing tomorrow, right? and the thing that you thought was super important is just like it's not. You could have been working on it for 6 months, a year or something, right? And it's like this no longer makes sense to us, right? So like being open to that, it's that like we're swimming in this like beautiful weird sea of open source, and like anything can change. Anything can change. Be open to that. What is it? Go with the flow. Be the flow.
Staying nautical themed as always. Fantastic, Steve.
Gotta be on brand.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's taken Riptide yet, which can hit you from time to time, so be mindful of that. Awesome. We have about a minute left. Thank you all so much for joining. If there are any final topics or just parting words of wisdom that you want to drop, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, really appreciate y'all for making it through the retro and getting it done in 3 parts. Congrats, everybody.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone here on the release team and with SIG Release for all your support for 123. And I appreciate it.
Great work, everyone.
All right.
Happy holidays. Happy end of the year. Thank y'all so much.
Holidays.